Welcome back to Silent Paws and Brave Hearts. The rain came without warning that evening. It swept down the narrow streets of Clarksburg, West Virginia in cold, heavy sheets, filling the gutters and blurring the storefronts into pale, trembling shapes of light. Most people ducked inside, windows fogged, doors clicked shut. The world grew smaller, quieter, and colder all at once. But on the corner of Maple and Fifth, just outside Henley's General Store, a man lay on the sidewalk. He was curled against the brick wall, his coat soaked through, his knees drawn toward his chest, as if trying to protect whatever warmth was left in his body. A large German shepherd lay pressed against him, fur-drenched, dark amber eyes wide and unblinking, watching the world with the quiet intensity of a creature who understood, perhaps better than anyone, how fragile the line between here and gone truly was. People slowed as they passed. Some stopped briefly, their umbrellas tilting as they looked down. A few reached for their phones, not to call for help, but to record. Others simply looked away, pulled their coats tighter, and walked on into the warm, indifferent evening. They didn't know his name. They didn't see the worn dog tags resting against his chest, rising and falling with each shallow breath. They didn't notice the old army boots on his feet, cracked at the sole but polished, always polished, not from vanity but from discipline, from a code that had been pressed so deep into his bones that even the street could not strip it away. They didn't know that when the national anthem played, even on a passing car radio, even here on this cold, wet corner, he still tried to stand. His name was Ethan Cole. And before you judge the man lying on that rain-soaked sidewalk, you need to hear where he came from. Ethan Cole was born in the hill country of West Virginia in 1961, the eldest of 4 children, raised in a household where service was not a choice, it was a calling. His father had served in Korea, his grandfather in the Second World War. By the time Ethan was 17, he already understood that some men are shaped not by comfort, but by the places they are sent and the things they are asked to carry when they get there. He enlisted at 18, sharp eyes, quiet determination, and a physical endurance that made the drill instructors take notice during his very first week of basic training. Within a few years, Ethan had earned a reputation not just as a soldier, but as a man others trusted without question, the kind of man you wanted beside you in the dark. He served 2 decades in the United States Army, deployments that took him to places most Americans would never find on a map, and some he was never permitted to speak of when he came home. He survived firefights, ambushes, and the particular silence that follows violence, a silence so complete it becomes its own kind of sound, ringing in a place beneath hearing, somewhere in the chest. But it was one mission during the final year of his service that would remain with him longer than any other. It was a classified operation in a mountainous region overseas, a small unit, a narrow road, and a roadside bomb that announced itself with a flash of white light and a percussion that Ethan would later say he felt not just in his body, but somewhere deeper, in the place where a soldier keeps all the things he cannot afford to feel. The smoke cleared to reveal chaos. 3 of his men were down. Retreat was ordered over the radio, immediate, unconditional. And in that smoke and fire, through the ringing in his ears and the blood on the side of his face, Ethan heard something, a voice, faint and desperate, calling from beneath a collapsed section of debris. It was a young combat medic, a woman barely 24 years old, who had been kneeling to treat a wounded soldier when the explosion hit. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. She was pinned beneath concrete and twisted metal, her leg broken, her radio destroyed, her voice fading with each second that passed.
Retreat was ordered, and one soldier ran back. Ethan. He will tell you, if you ever ask him on a good day, that he didn't think about it, that thinking in those seconds would have made it impossible. He simply moved through smoke and incoming fire, through the burning wreckage and the desperate mathematics of survival, and he reached her. He pulled the debris aside with his bare hands, tearing his palms on the jagged metal without stopping. He lifted her onto his shoulders, and he carried her. Through bullets, through chaos, through the long, awful distance between where she lay and where safety waited. When they finally reached cover, she grabbed his arm and looked at him with eyes full of tears. She didn't have the strength to cry. "You came back," she whispered. "Leave no one behind," he said simply. And he never spoke about that day again. He came home the following spring, but the man who returned was different from the one who had left. Not broken, no, Ethan Cole was never broken, but quieter, slower, older than his years in the way that combat makes a person old, not in the body alone, but in the eyes, in the particular way they pause before answering a question, as if checking first that the answer is safe to give. He found his way back to West Virginia, back to a small house on the edge of town, and to a woman named Mira, who had waited for him with the patient certainty of someone who simply knew that some men are worth waiting for. Mira was warmth in human form. She laughed easily, cooked Sunday dinners that drew neighbors in from 3 houses down, and had a way of sitting beside Ethan in his quiet without trying to fill it with noise. She understood that silence was not absence, that some of the most important things a man carries, he carries without words. And she loved him, not despite his silences, but through them and around them, and into all the spaces where words could not reach. For 17 years, they built a life together. Small but solid, a garden in the backyard, evenings on the porch, a dog-eared Bible on the nightstand, and photographs on the mantel that told the story of 2 people who had chosen every single day to keep choosing each other. Then the diagnosis came. Lung cancer, stage 3. The words settled over their household like the first frost of autumn, not a sudden storm, but something that arrives quietly and changes everything it touches. Mira faced it the way she faced everything, with grace, with humor when she could manage it, and with a love for Ethan that deepened rather than diminished as her body began to lose its long argument with the disease. In the last months of her life, when words became harder to find and the days grew shorter, she pressed something into Ethan's hands, a leash. At the end of it, a young German shepherd, big-pawed, amber-eyed, and already watching Ethan with an alertness that seemed to say, "I see you. I'm here." "His name is Valor," she told him, her voice fragile but steady, the way a candle flame is steady even when the wind tries to reach it. Ethan looked at the dog, then back at her. "Mira, when I'm gone," she said gently, cutting him off with the kind of tenderness that doesn't need volume to be heard, "he'll guard your heart for me." She passed on a Tuesday morning in October, with the window cracked and the sound of wind in the maple tree outside their bedroom. Ethan held her hand until it grew cool. He did not cry then. He cried later, alone on the back porch, with Valor pressed against his legs, and the night sky spread wide above him, indifferent and immense, and somehow still beautiful. He kept her wedding ring on a thin chain around his neck, just below his dog tags. He kept her last voicemail saved on a cracked phone he could no longer charge, but charged one final time just to hear her voice say his name before the battery died for good. What came next happened the way so many veteran stories happen, slowly, then all at once. The medical bills for Mira's treatment had been staggering. Ethan, who had never been a man to ask for help, had quietly signed papers and made arrangements he did not fully understand, trusting that things would work themselves out because they always had before. But grief and paperwork do not coexist well, and by the time the final notice arrived, the house, the one with the garden and the porch and the photographs on the mantel, was no longer his. He packed what he could carry: Mira's ring around his neck, Valor by his side, a duffel bag with a change of clothes, his honorable discharge papers folded carefully inside a Ziploc bag, and a small framed photograph he kept face down most days, because seeing it still hurt in a way he had not yet learned to manage.
The VA system tried. Caseworkers called, then stopped calling. Shelters had waiting lists. Benefits moved through channels too slowly for a man losing weight and warmth in real time. And somewhere along the way, quietly, without announcement or apology, America forgot him. He is not the only one. Tonight, more veterans sleep on the sidewalks of this country than most people realize. Men and women who once defended freedom, now fighting for the simple survival of warmth and a meal and a place to rest without one eye open. It is a quiet national shame, dressed in statistics no one reads and budget lines no one fights for the way they once fought for the people behind them. Ethan did not rage against it. He did not hold a sign or shout at the sky. He simply endured, the way soldiers endure, with his head down and his boots polished, and Valor never more than 3 feet away. He still tried to stand when the anthem played. The night it happened was the coldest of the season. Ethan had found a sheltered corner outside Henley's general store, a bit of overhang that blocked the worst of the wind, a concrete ledge that held some of the day's fading warmth. He had wrapped himself in every layer he owned, and Valor had settled against him the way he always did, full body contact, deliberate and warm and unwavering, like a living blanket that understood exactly what it was for. But the temperature kept dropping, and Ethan's body, already stretched thin by months of exposure and inadequate nutrition and the particular exhaustion that presses into a person's joints, began to lose the fight. His shivering slowed, his breathing shallowed, his thoughts grew distant and strange, drifting toward Mira's face, toward the sound of helicopters and the weight of a young medic on his shoulders, toward a back porch and a dog pressed against his legs, and a night sky full of stars that never asked anything of him. Valor felt it before anyone else did. He pressed himself harder against Ethan's side. He licked the man's face, urgent and insistent. He whimpered, low and deliberate, a sound that carried through the rain-soaked air like a question no one was answering. And when Ethan's eyes did not open, Valor, something that a witness standing nearby would later describe as one of the most remarkable things she had ever seen an animal do. He moved to the edge of the sidewalk and began to bark, not at passers-by, but directly at the entrance of the store, where warm golden light spilled through the glass door. He barked until a teenage employee came out to investigate. He barked until the boy knelt down beside Ethan and saw the shallow rise and fall of his chest and ran back inside to call 911. Then Valor returned to Ethan's side, lay back down against him, and he did not move again until the sirens arrived. The emergency room of Clarksburg General was busy that night, the kind of organized urgency that hospital staff navigate through training and muscle memory, and the particular calm that comes from having seen so much that very little surprises you anymore. The paramedics had radioed ahead, severe hypothermia, critically low blood pressure, fading vitals. Adult male, approximate age early 60s, found unresponsive outside a local business. They did not mention his name. They did not know it yet. The attending physician on duty that evening was Dr. Sarah Mitchell.
She was 47 years old, 2 years past a divorce she was still quietly recovering from, and she had long ago made peace with the particular loneliness of emergency medicine, the way people came and out of your life at their worst moments and rarely came back to tell you the rest of the story. She had built a fine career on the quiet promise she made to herself every morning before a shift, that every person who came through those doors would be treated as if they mattered entirely, because they did. She walked into the trauma bay with her clipboard and her professional calm, and she looked down at the patient on the gurney, and she stopped. The room tilted. The sounds of the ER, the beeping monitors, the voices, the distant clatter of equipment receded as if someone had turned down the volume on the world. She knew that face. Older now, weathered by years and weather and grief, the lines deeper, the hair silver where it had once been dark. But the jaw was the same, the way the brow rested, heavy and certain. Even in unconsciousness was exactly the same, and the dog tags on his chest, rising and falling, the same. "Ethan?" she whispered. The room went still. A nurse looked up. A resident paused mid-motion. No one spoke. Dr. Mitchell stepped to his bedside, and for a moment she was not a doctor in a trauma bay in West Virginia. She was a 24-year-old combat medic in the smoke and ruin of a mountain war zone, pinned beneath debris, her radio gone, her voice fading, and then the sound of someone coming back, someone who had been ordered to leave and came back anyway. Her voice broke. "You don't get to leave like this," she said. "Do you hear me? You do not get to leave like this." She turned to her team, and her voice was steady again, the voice of a doctor, clear and certain, and without room for doubt. "Let's bring him back." Hospital policy did not allow dogs in critical care. Dr. Mitchell was aware of this policy. She had enforced it herself more than once. She broke it without hesitation. "Bring the dog," she told the nurse at the door. "Please, right now, bring him." Valor was brought in from the waiting area, where he had been sitting beside the automatic doors with the still, watchful patience of a sentinel who has not yet been relieved of his post. His paws were still damp from the rain. His coat was beginning to dry in uneven peaks. His eyes, the moment the nurse led him through the door of Ethan's room, moved immediately and completely to the bed. He crossed the room slowly, not with the bounding relief of a dog reuniting after an ordinary separation, but carefully, deliberately, the way you move when you understand that something is fragile and every step matters. He reached the bedside. He paused. Then, with a gentleness that made at least 2 nurses look away to quietly compose themselves, Valor lowered his great head and rested it against Ethan's motionless hand. The monitor flickered. A finger twitched. A breath deepened, slow and long and deliberate, like a man deciding to stay. Ethan's eyes opened, not all at once, in pieces, the way light returns after an eclipse, gradual and tentative, and then suddenly, undeniably present. His lips moved, and the first word he whispered, barely sound, barely breath, barely there, was "Valor." The dog's ears lifted instantly. His tail moved once, twice, a slow, soft rhythm against the side of the hospital bed. Not celebration, something quieter, something that felt to everyone in that room like an answer that had been waiting a very long time to be given. The heart monitor steadied. A nurse wiped her eyes and pretended she hadn't. The resident cleared his throat and studied the ceiling for a moment longer than the ceiling required. Dr. Mitchell leaned close to Ethan, close enough that her voice would reach him and nothing else in the world. "You carried me out of a war zone," she whispered, her tears falling freely now, unhurried and unashamed. "Let me carry you out of this one." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, his eyes, still clouded, still finding their way back to the present, moved slowly across her face, and then they focused, and he knew her. His hand, the one that Valor had not left, moved slightly, reached toward her. She took it. Morning came to Clarksburg the way it comes after a hard storm, slowly, gently, as if the light itself understood what the night had cost and was arriving with an apology. Soft gold through the hospital window, the sound of birds returning to the eaves, the American flag in the corridor, hanging still and steady and unwavering in the quiet air.
Ethan Cole was listed in stable condition by 6 in the morning. His temperature had returned to safe levels. His blood pressure was responding. The doctors said he would need weeks of recovery, good nutrition, warmth, consistent care. Dr. Mitchell had already begun making calls. In the days and weeks that followed, a quiet coalition assembled itself around Ethan Cole, the way communities sometimes do when the right story reaches the right people at exactly the right moment. A local veterans organization secured emergency housing. A pro bono attorney reviewed his VA claim and found 3 years of benefits that had been incorrectly processed and never paid. A physical therapist volunteered her off hours. The teenage boy who had called 911, 16 years old, named Marcus, came to visit twice. Once out of curiosity, a second time because, as he told his mother quietly, he just felt like he ought to. And Valor never left his side, not once. On the morning Ethan was well enough to sit up in bed, Dr. Mitchell came in early, before her shift officially began. She brought real coffee, not the thin hospital version, and she sat in the chair beside the bed and they talked, really talked, perhaps for the first time, about the day that had quietly and permanently connected their lives across 20 years of distance. Ethan apologized for not finding her sooner, for not reaching out. She told him there was nothing to apologize for, that she had looked for him once years ago and found only a forwarding address that led nowhere, that she had thought of him often on the long nights when medicine felt impossible and the weight of the work seemed too much to hold. She would think, he came back. He ran back through smoke and fire when he didn't have to. He chose. And that thought, she told him, had steadied her more times than she could count. "You gave me more than my life," she said quietly. "You gave me the reason I became the kind of doctor I am." Ethan was quiet for a long time after that. He looked out the window at the morning light, at the flag in the corridor, at Valor asleep across his feet in deliberate, warm defiance of several hospital regulations. Then he said softly, "Mira would have liked you."
Dr. Mitchell smiled. "Tell me about her." And he did. He talked about her laugh and her Sunday dinners and the way she sat with him in silence without needing to fill it. He talked about the garden and the porch and the photograph he had carried face down for too long. He talked about a leash pressed into his hands and a whispered promise that had, against every odd, kept itself. For the first time in a very long time, Ethan Cole talked, and someone listened. There is a version of this story that ends on that sidewalk, that ends in cold and silence and the indifferent footsteps of strangers who had somewhere else to be. But stories, like soldiers, do not always go where they are expected. Ethan Cole is alive today. He lives in a small veterans apartment on the east side of Clarksburg, second floor with a window that catches the afternoon light the way Mira's kitchen always did. He has a caseworker named Beth who checks in every Tuesday. He has a neighbor named Frank, a Korean War-era historian who comes over Sunday evenings to talk history and drink strong tea.
He has a photograph on his nightstand now, face up. And he has Valor, always Valor. On Veterans Day, Ethan still polishes his boots. He sits beside the window in the morning light, and when the anthem plays on the television, he rises, slowly, one hand resting briefly against the dog tags and the wedding ring on the chain at his chest, and he stands, straight and quiet and certain. Valor sits beside him, still, watching, steady as a promise. Because the country Ethan served may have forgotten him for a time, but his dog never did. And this time, someone ran back for him.
Because heroes do not stop being heroes when the uniform comes off. Sometimes they grow older. Sometimes they fall. Sometimes they end up on a rain-soaked corner in a city that does not know their name. And sometimes the only one who refuses to leave them behind walks on four legs, guards a heart that once guarded us all, and waits with the loyalty that human beings have always aspired to and animals have always simply lived, for the voice that will, one more time, say his name. Before you walk past someone today, pause for just a moment. You do not know what they carried. You do not know what they survived. You do not know what they lost in the service of something larger than themselves. Every person has a story. Some of them are decorated with medals. Some of them sleep on sidewalks. All of them deserve to be seen. Subscribe lines, silent paws and brave hearts. If this story moved something in you, if you felt your breath catch when Valor laid his head on that motionless hand, then this channel was made for you. Every week we bring you the stories that the world walks past. Hit subscribe and join a family that believes every silent hero deserves to be seen and every brave heart deserves to be heard. Stories like Ethan's are all around us. They walk quietly. They sleep in places we don't think to look. They carry medals no one asks to see, and love no one knows to honor. Subscribe to Silent Paws and Brave Hearts so you never miss the stories that matter most, the ones told not with noise, but with loyalty. And if no one has told you today, thank you for caring enough to listen. Thank you for staying until the end. That matters more than you know. Please share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below telling us what part touched your heart. And we will see you in the next story, because there are so many more waiting to be told.